Beyond words, our souls collide in the rhythm where dreams reside. Beyond words, we touch the sky.
Welcome to the Beyond Words Deep Dive Sessions, an inspiring exploration of the book Beyond Words by Marcia and John.
Ever walk into a room and just feel that energy shift? You know what I mean? Sometimes it's electric, buzzing with good vibes. Other times, well, let's just say you can practically hear the crickets chirping.
It's palpable, isn't it?
Yeah.
That feeling when you walk into a room and can just sense the tone.
Exactly. And today we're diving into what creates those dynamics, exploring that invisible force that makes or breaks communication, rapport.
We're going deep, too, going beyond those surface-level tips you often hear. We're going to give you the why behind those magical moments when conversations just click.
Love that. Okay, so picture this. You're with me, people watching at a Biggie Cafe. What is it about certain pairs, those duos, that just exude that in-sync vibe?
They're just so present with each other, you know? It's like they're in their own world, completely tuned into one another.
Yeah, you can practically feel the connection radiating from them. I've always wondered, what's the secret sauce there?
Well, you might be surprised to learn that a lot of it boils down to something we do instinctively. Mirroring.
Mirroring, like straight up copying someone's every move. That sounds more awkward than awesome, if I'm being honest.
Right, not exactly the smoothest approach. Think about it more like a subtle dance. You see someone lean in, you might subconsciously lean in just a bit yourself.
Okay, I see. It's not about becoming a copycat. It's about, finding that subtle synchronicity.
Precisely. And there's a fascinating neurological reason for this. Our brains are wired with these things called mirror neurons. And they're basically firing away like crazy when we connect with someone.
So walk me through this. What are these mirror neurons really doing?
These neurons, they activate both when we do something and when we observe someone else doing the same thing. It's like our brain is trying to get in sync with the other person without us even realizing it.
So it's like our brain is saying, hey, we're on the same wavelength here just because we both reached for the salt shaker at the same time.
Exactly. This mirroring, it creates a sense of shared experience, even if it's as simple as, taking a sip of coffee simultaneously.
Wow.
And that feeling of being in sync, it's incredibly powerful for building understanding and empathy. Think about those times you've instantly clicked with someone. Chances are your mirror neurons were working overtime.
That's incredible. So if we're not supposed to become copycats, what's the right way to tap into this mirroring magic? How do we find that sweet spot?
It's all about being intentional and subtle. Instead of mimicking their every move, focus on matching their energy in a way that feels natural. Think about things like posture, tone of voice, even the pace at which they speak. You want to, meet them where they are.
So if someone is speaking slowly and softly, I should try to match that energy instead of, barging in with my usual, let's say, enthusiastic pace.
Precisely. It's about creating a shared rhythm for the conversation.
It's like you're trying to find their tempo and then gently join in the dance.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, here's where things get even more interesting. While mirroring is about finding that shared rhythm, there are times when intentionally breaking the mirroring pattern can actually be incredibly effective. We call this mismatching.
Mismatching. You're saying there are times when you don't want to be in sync. That seems, kind of counterintuitive. Why would you want to break the flow?
Think of it like hitting the reset button in a conversation. Let's say things are getting a little heated. Maybe someone's getting defensive. Their arms are crossed. Their tone is getting sharp. If you mirror that intensity, you might unintentionally escalate the situation.
So if you sense things are about to go off the rails, mismatching is a way to kind of steer the conversation back to calmer waters.
Exactly. In that situation, instead of mirroring their closed-off posture, you might try leaning back slightly, keeping your own posture open and relaxed. It subtly shifts the dynamic without being confrontational.
It's like you're non-verbally saying, okay, let's take a breath here and approach this from a calmer place.
Precisely. Now, I want to emphasize that mismatching is a subtle art. It's not about making a big show of doing the opposite of everything they do. Right. That would just come across as jarring and inauthentic.
So it's less about a dramatic shift and more about making these little micro adjustments to kind of guide the conversation in a different direction, like a nudge rather than a shove.
You got it. And speaking of subtle ways to guide a conversation, let's talk about backtracking and paraphrasing. Both techniques involve reflecting back what someone has said, but they have distinct effects.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Break it down for me. What's the difference between backtracking and paraphrasing, and when would you use each one?
Imagine you're holding up a mirror to someone's words.
Yeah.
That's backtracking. You're repeating their key phrases almost verbatim, showing them you're truly present and listening without judgment.
So if someone says, I'm feeling so overwhelmed with this project, a good backtrack might be, you're feeling overwhelmed.
You got it.
Yeah.
You're not adding your own interpretation or trying to fix it, just reflecting their words back to them. It's incredibly validating, especially when someone's feeling emotional.
It's like you're saying, I hear you, I see you, and your feelings are valid.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, paraphrasing is a bit different. With paraphrasing, you're still reflecting back what the other person said, but you're putting it into your own words. You're showing them, you're trying to understand their perspective, but you're also adding a layer of interpretation.
So using that same example, I'm feeling so overwhelmed with this project. A paraphrase might be, it sounds like you've got a lot on your plate right now.
Exactly. And that might be a perfectly accurate paraphrase, but it subtly shifts the focus from their feelings to the external situation. Sometimes that's helpful, but it's important to be mindful of those subtle shifts.
It's like that game of telephone. The message can subtly change as it gets passed along. So when is it best to use backtracking versus paraphrasing?
When you're building rapport, especially in those emotionally charged moments, backtracking is your best bet. It shows you're fully present and listening without judgment. Paraphrasing is useful for clarifying understanding or gently guiding the conversation in a new direction, but it requires a bit more finesse.
You know, this reminds me of the horseback riding story you shared earlier about your daughters. You talked about how you learned to use your own energy to help them regulate their emotions after a fall. Is that an example of backtracking and paraphrasing in action, or is this something else entirely? It's like you intuitively tapped into this whole idea of pacing and leading. You met them where they were in their fear and then gently guided them to a calmer state.
You're exactly right. It's not about dismissing their feelings or pretending they're not there. It's about, creating space for them to regulate their own emotions by mirroring your calmness. When you think about it, pacing and leading, they're like two sides of the same coin, right? You're using both backtracking and paraphrasing, along with those subtle shifts in your own energy, to create a shared experience that moves the conversation in a positive direction.
That's such a powerful example of how we can use these techniques to connect with others on a deeper level. It's not about manipulation or anything like that. It's about creating a space for genuine connection and understanding. It's like you're speaking the same language even when words aren't enough.
Precisely. And that's what's so fascinating about this whole concept of rapport. It's not some magical skill reserved for a select few, It's within everyone's reach. We all have this innate ability to connect with each other on a deeper level. It's just about tapping into that potential.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the art of rapport, what's the one thing you hope our listeners will take away from this conversation?
Remember that rapport starts with being present, being observant, and genuinely interested in the person across from you. Act as if the person you're talking to is the most important person in your life, because in that moment, they are.
It's like that quote we mentioned earlier, the most important person in the world is the one standing right in front of you.
Exactly. When you approach your conversations with that level of presence and intention, you open yourself up to a whole new level of connection and understanding. And who knows, you might even spark a little mirror neuron magic along the way.
I love that. Well, I don't know about you, but I am feeling inspired to put all of this into practice. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of rapport. Until next time, keep those conversations flowing, and remember, the power of connection is in your hands.
Thank you for listening. Give us a like and share your comments. Order the book via the link in the comments. Stay tuned for more.
Beyond words, our souls collide in the rhythm where dreams reside. Beyond words, we touch the sky. In this moment, you and I, charismatic.